All right, let's dive in. Max Scheler, Phenomenology. We've got a stack of academic excerpts here, kind of dense stuff, but you want the core concepts, right? The big aha moments.
Well, you've picked a good one. Scheler was tackling some of the biggest questions in philosophy. He was really wrestling with this age-old quest for unity, that fundamental principle that explains everything.
But what's the meaning of it all? The big picture.
Exactly. Think Plato's form of the good, or even in modern science, the search for a unified theory of everything.
Hmm.
Scheler was engaging with that tradition.
So he wasn't satisfied with the answers he was finding from other philosophers?
He had his critiques, for sure. He felt the key was in what he called the Vasen's Reich, which translates to the realm of essence.
Okay, so not just ideas in our heads, but something real.
Yeah.
Out there in the world.
You got it. Think of them as the building blocks of meaning, the fundamental structures of reality.
Essence. It's a bit abstract. How do we access these essences? How do we even know they exist?
Through what he called phenomenological reflection. It's a fancy way of saying we carefully examine our experiences to see what structures are operating beneath the surface.
Kind of like peeling back the layers to see what's really going on.
Exactly. It's about getting to the heart of what things are, not just how they appear.
Okay, I'm starting to get it, but could you give me an example? I need something concrete to wrap my head around this essence thing.
Sure. Think about the concept of value.
Yeah.
Let's say you're an ancient Greek architect. You're not just arbitrarily deciding that harmony and proportion are important in building, right?
Right, there's got to be some reasoning behind it.
You're discovering those values almost like they're possibilities inherent in the very nature of space itself and how bodies move through it.
So those values were always there, like a blueprint waiting to be discovered and expressed through the architecture.
Precisely. And Scheler believed this applied to much bigger concepts too. Life, God, even the human person. These essences, he argued, are what shape our understanding of ourselves and the world.
Okay, that's making me think about how we form ideas about the world in a whole new way. Now, I know Scheler was famous for challenging other big thinkers. How did he apply these ideas to critique someone like, say, David Hume?
Hume was all about our senses. He said causality, cause and effect, is just us observing one event constantly following another. But Scheler argued we actually perceive something deeper.
Like, we don't just see things happen, we understand why they happen.
Exactly. Imagine watching a glass shatter.
Oh.
Hume would say you're just seeing a sequence of events.
But Scheller's saying there's more to it than that.
He'd say you're grasping the connection, the force that makes the glass shatter. You're directly intuiting the cause, not just passively observing. And this direct grasp of essences is key to Scheller's philosophy.
Interesting. So he's adding a layer of intuition to how we understand the world. I wonder how this lines up with other philosophers who were into essences, Plato, for example, or Aristotle.
Scheler had his own unique take. Plato, believed true reality was in this realm of perfect forms, and we gain knowledge by remembering them, almost like he was looking backwards to an ideal world.
While Scheller's looking outward, into the world itself.
Exactly. He believed knowledge involves reaching beyond ourselves to grasp those essences embedded in the world, not just inward reflection. But I can already hear some people pushing back on this whole essence thing.
Oh, absolutely. Especially those postmodern thinkers who are skeptical of anything absolute or universal. They might see essence as an attempt to impose order on a world that's really fluid and constantly changing.
Scheler was aware of those critiques. He understood the dangers of rigid essentialism. He valued diversity. He knew human perspective was limited. In fact, there's another philosopher who's relevant here, George Santayana, the American philosopher. He also had a concept of a realm of essence.
Really? Were they on the same page with this idea?
There were some fascinating parallels. Santayana saw essences as these crystallized meanings, independent of the material world, kind of like the Buddhist concept of essences.
And like Scheler, he believed our minds aren't just passively observing, but are transformed by the essences we encounter.
Precisely. Engaging with those essences actually changes us. Where they differ is in how this connects to action, to ethics. Scheller's ideas about essences fed directly into his moral theory, his view of right and wrong.
Okay, let's get into that. How did this essence idea shape his view of morality?
Scheler developed something called material value ethics. It means values aren't just things we learn or decide on, but are a priori. Like those essences, they're built-in, objective features of reality that we discover through our intuition.
So he's saying morality isn't relative or subjective. There's an objective order to values.
Exactly. It's not about what feels good or what society dictates, but about recognizing what is inherently good regardless of our opinions. And this order isn't something we create, it's something we discover.
So how do we discover this order?
Think of your own personal music playlist. You've got songs you love, some you hate, others you're indifferent to. For Scheler, that's a reflection of your Ordo Amoris.
Ordo Amoris.
It means order of love. It's your internal ranking of values, what you're drawn to, what repels you. It guides your actions.
So my Ordo Amoris shapes how I see the world and how I act in it.
You got it. And Scheler believed we experience these values through feelings initially, that gut feeling of being drawn to some things and repulsed by others. But we can go beyond those subjective feelings to grasp values in their pure form, through that phenomenological reflection we talked about.
So we have to work at it to refine our understanding of what's truly good.
It's a process, for sure. And this is where things get really interesting, because it raises questions about how we develop morally. How do we make sure our Ordo Amoris is aligned with that objective order of values? How do we avoid imposing our own subjective preferences onto it?
Those are big questions. And I know we're just scratching the surface here, but I'm already starting to see how this idea of essences and values connects to Scheller's views on the human person.
You're right. He saw the individual person as a trace of essence. It's like, imagine a crystal with its own unique structure. It reflects light in its own way, right?
But all crystals have a certain structure in common.
Exactly. That structure is like your Ordo Amoris, your unique way of organizing and prioritizing those universal values.
So while the universal order of values exists objectively, each person embodies it subjectively. That's a fascinating idea.
It is, and it helps to explain both our common humanity and our individual differences. But this Ordo Amoris isn't static. It can be distorted. Things like resentment, prejudice, even just societal pressures can warp it. Scheler called these distortions moral diseases.
Moral diseases, that's a powerful image, like something's preventing us from seeing those values clearly.
Exactly. And overcoming those distortions is key to moral growth. Now, shifting gears a bit, I know Scheler also had some intriguing ideas about fate, but he wasn't talking about destiny being imposed from outside, was he?
From what I've read, no. His concept of fate was more about how we perceive and interpret the events of our lives.
You got it. He wasn't talking about some predetermined plan, but about how we make sense of the choices we've made, the experiences we've had.
So it's not, I was destined to become a doctor, but rather, the events of my life, as I experienced them, led me down this path. It's more subjective.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the significance of certain events, how they've shaped us. And this leads into Scheller's unique view of time. He didn't see it as just linear, just past, present, future, all in a line.
He had this idea of 3 dimensions of time, right? The immediate, present, past, and future all intermingling.
You're right on track. The past isn't just gone, it's influencing how we perceive the present. And the future isn't just unknown, it's shaping our hopes and fears right now.
So it's more like we're living in this dynamic interplay of all 3 dimensions at once. Past, present, and future all shaping each other.
Precisely. And understanding this is key for how we experience time and how it, in turn, shapes our lives. Now, switching gears again, I know Scheler also had some pretty intense ideas about love. He didn't see it as just a fleeting emotion, did he?
From what I've read, no. He saw it as a powerful force that could actually transform people, help them grow morally.
He did. He believed that being loved by another person, truly loved, could have this profound moral effect, transforming the person who is loved. It's like this moral illumination, helping us to see ourselves and others in a new light.
It's almost like love acts as a catalyst for moral growth, for becoming better versions of ourselves.
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting. Scheler even connected this to Christian ideas about Christ's love and suggested that even in God's love for the world, there might be an element of moral judgment and ethical consideration. A pretty radical idea, right?
Yeah, definitely makes you think about traditional views of God in a whole new light, which seems to be Scheller's specialty, shaking things up. Speaking of which, he also had a lot to say about sympathy, and not just in the everyday I feel sorry for you sense.
Oh, he went much deeper than that.
Yeah.
He distinguished different forms of sympathetic connection, 4 of them, in fact. And the highest form he called feeling together.
Feeling together, what does that even mean?
It's not just feeling for someone, but actually experiencing their emotions as your own, while still recognizing that those feelings ultimately belong to them.
Wow, that's intense. Do you have an example?
Imagine two parents grieving the loss of their child. They each feel the same pain, but each parent also understands that the other is suffering. It's this deep empathy, a true sharing of the emotional experience.
That's heavy, but I get it. Now, I know Scheler also wrote about the group soul and the group spirit. How did he see those shaping shared knowledge within communities?
This is where he gets into what's called the sociology of knowledge. He distinguished between the group soul, which is expressed through things like myths, sagas, folk music. It's the emotional core of a community. And then there's the group spirit, which is the more intellectual, structured system of knowledge, laws, philosophies, religious doctrines, that kind of thing.
So you've got the emotional undercurrent and then a more formal intellectual framework that a community builds upon that.
Exactly. And he argued that these two aspects are constantly interacting, shaping each other, influencing how a society develops its worldview.
But he didn't think there was one single absolute worldview that everyone shares, right?
No way.
Yeah.
Scheler was all about recognizing diversity, the unique expressions of different cultures. But he also believed that all these different worldviews are ultimately grounded in that realm of essence we talked about earlier.
So there's this balance between recognizing the unique ways humans understand the world and acknowledging the shared reality based on those fundamental essences.
Exactly. Now, let's move into Scheller's thoughts on religious experience. This should be interesting, especially given his background in Christianity.
Yeah, how did he approach this from his phenomenological perspective?
He believed that religious consciousness experiences God, not as a thing, but as a presence.
A presence.
Yeah, kind of like how you experience the presence of another person. It's direct, immediate, you sense it.
So it's not about proving God through logic or argumentation, but about understanding how people actually experience the divine.
You got it. And he believed that this experience is rooted in love, in that deep connection, and leads to a sense of God's effectiveness in the world, not as a forceful actor, but as this ground of essential structures.
Okay, that needs unpacking. Ground of essential structures.
Think of it like this. Imagine God as an artist and the world as the artwork. We experience God through the beauty, the meaning embedded in creation itself. It's not about miracles or divine intervention, but about recognizing the deeper significance of existence itself.
That's a really cool analogy. Okay, so moving from God to humanity, I know Scheler also developed a whole concept called philosophical anthropology, which explored what it means to be human.
He did, and he was very critical of those who reduced us to just biology or just social forces. He saw something more in us.
So he was pushing back against people like Freud, who saw the psyche as driven by those unconscious instincts and desires.
Exactly. Scheler argued against Freud's idea of the superego as just a product of social and evolutionary pressures. He thought our capacity for moral reasoning went much deeper.
So more free will, more responsibility than some might think. We're not just puppets of our biology or environment.
Right. For Scheler, it's that ability to transcend those limitations that makes us truly human. It's what allows us to grasp those essences, experience love, connect with something greater than ourselves.
And that leads us to this question. What does it mean to live a truly human life, according to Scheler? Did he have a vision for how we navigate these challenges of modernity?
He did. And he called it Ausgleich. It's a German word that's tough to translate. But it essentially means a process of mutual understanding and interpenetration between different cultures and systems of knowledge.
So not just everyone becoming the same, but a real exchange of ideas, a genuine effort to learn from each other.
Exactly. He saw this as essential for a new kind of enlightenment, one that embraces a more holistic and inclusive view of humanity.
That's a beautiful vision. But it seems incredibly difficult to achieve in a world that's, well, increasingly polarized. How did Scheler think we could make this Ausgleich happen?
He believed education was key. And not just education in the traditional sense of acquiring information. He saw it as a transformative experience, something that could awaken us to our spiritual potential and help us connect with that shared humanity underlying all those cultural differences.
So not just stuffing our heads with facts, but cultivating the empathy and understanding that allow us to see the world through different lenses.
You got it. He thought that this kind of transformative education could help us bridge those cultural divides and work towards a more harmonious future. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness and tapping into the potential for compassion and wisdom that's within each of us.
This is incredibly inspiring. It makes you think about the power of education to shape not just individuals, but entire societies. But I know we need to pause here for now. There's so much more to unpack in Schiller's work.
Absolutely. We've only just scratched the surface.
But before we wrap up this part of our exploration, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder. Remember Schiller's concept of Ausgleich, that process of mutual understanding between different cultures and systems of knowledge?
Yes, it's central to his vision for the future.
So here's the question. How might we apply that concept to our own lives, to our relationships, our communities, even the world at large? How can we cultivate those qualities of mind and heart that allow us to really engage with different perspectives, to bridge those cultural divides, and to work towards that more inclusive and compassionate future?
That's a question worth wrestling with, and one that we'll delve into further in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned.
It's a question that really gets to the heart of Schiller's project, doesn't it? This idea of bridging those divides, finding common ground, and it makes you wonder how his own life experiences might have influenced those ideas.
You're right. Moving between Germany and France, engaging with those different intellectual traditions, it probably shaped his thinking quite a bit.
Definitely. But before we get too sidetracked by his biography, let's pick up where we left off. You were asking about his ideas on shame and modesty.
Oh, right. It's not a topic that comes up in philosophy every day.
It's a fascinating area. Schiller wrote a whole essay about it, shame and feelings of modesty. And one of his main arguments was that shame, especially its link to sexuality, played a key role not just in our personal development, but in the evolution of human social life as a whole.
So he's not just talking about shame as a personal emotion, but as something that shaped how we relate to each other, how societies developed.
Exactly. He saw it as a kind of social regulator, influencing how we present ourselves to others, especially when it comes to attraction and relationships. Who we're drawn to, how we behave in those romantic contexts.
It makes sense. Shame can make us very self-conscious, especially when we're trying to make a good impression on someone.
Right. And Scheler pointed out that this emotion expresses itself in different ways. Some are more instinctive, like blushing, for example. That's an automatic physiological response, totally involuntary.
It's like our body betraying our inner feelings, no matter how hard we try to hide them.
Exactly. Whereas covering ourselves with clothing, that's more deliberate, a learned social convention.
It's fascinating how the same basic emotion can have both these instinctive and cultural expressions.
And Scheler is really interested in that interplay. He observed how different cultures develop unique customs and norms around modesty. What might be considered modest in one culture could be totally different in another. And these norms can change over time, too.
It makes you think about all those debates we have today about what's appropriate, what's considered modest, and how much of that is based on cultural norms versus something more universal.
Scheler was wrestling with those kinds of questions back in the early 20th century. But he didn't shy away from the less conventional aspects of shame either. In fact, he even tackled the topic of exhibitionism.
Whoa, that takes us in a whole different direction. What did he have to say about that?
He actually called it a perversion of shame. He suggested that it stems from this kind of hypersensitivity to those social expectations of modesty, almost like a rebellion against them.
So instead of conforming to those expectations, the exhibitionist is deliberately challenging them, maybe as a way of grabbing attention or subverting those social norms.
You're getting it. Scheler was always digging into those more complex, even taboo aspects of human behavior. He believed that we could learn a lot about ourselves, about how our minds and societies work, by examining even those emotions we might prefer to ignore.
It's like he's saying, don't just look at the pretty stuff, look at the messy stuff too. There's insight to be gained from all of it.
Precisely. And speaking of those less comfortable corners of human experience, he also had some really thought-provoking ideas about repentance. Remember that essay we mentioned earlier, Repentance and Rebirth?
Oh, yeah. I'm curious to hear how he approached this, especially given his emphasis on morality and personal transformation.
He saw repentance as more than just a religious concept. He believed it was a fundamental human experience, a path to profound change.
So not just confessing sins or seeking forgiveness in a religious context, but something more universal.
Exactly. He saw it as a process of actively revisiting and confronting our past actions, the good and the bad, and using those reflections to fuel moral growth.
So it's about taking responsibility for our choices, learning from our mistakes, and actively striving to become better people.
Exactly. He really emphasized acknowledging those mistakes, taking ownership of them, and trying to make amends when possible.
It makes me think of that saying, we are the sum of our choices. Repentance, for Scheler, seems to be about taking stock of those choices, learning from them, and using that knowledge to guide our future actions.
It's about becoming more conscious, more intentional in how we live our lives. And he believed this process could lead to greater moral clarity, greater integrity, even a sense of wholeness. But he also cautioned against reducing repentance to simply dwelling on past mistakes or wallowing in guilt.
So it's not about getting stuck in the past, but about using that reflection on the past to move forward in a more positive direction.
Exactly. It's about engaging with the moral implications of our choices, understanding their impact, and seeking to repair any harm we may have caused.
It sounds like it takes courage to really face those past mistakes and their consequences honestly, but he seems to be suggesting that there's freedom on the other side of that, a kind of liberation that comes from taking responsibility and making amends.
He did use a powerful metaphor. He talked about repentance as a light shining into our past. Like, it illuminates those hidden corners, helps us see ourselves more honestly and completely. He believed this kind of self-examination was crucial for growth.
I love that imagery. It's like instead of hiding from those difficult parts of ourselves, we're shining a light on them, bringing them into the open where we can learn from them.
And that, I think, is at the heart of Scheller's view of repentance. It's not about punishment or self-flagellation, but about growth, transformation, and ultimately greater compassion for ourselves and others.
Okay, we've explored some pretty heavy stuff. Shame, modesty, repentance. Let's shift gears now and delve into something a little more uplifting. What about Scheller's ideas about exemplary individuals? It feels like a natural progression from this discussion of moral development and self-transformation.
It is, and this is where Scheller's work is really inspiring. He believed that certain individuals embody values so powerfully that they become these models for others, guiding us towards higher levels of ethical and spiritual development.
So we're not talking about just your average person, but those who really stand out, who shine a light on what's possible.
Exactly. He was fascinated by how these exemplars could awaken something within us, challenge our assumptions, and expand our understanding of what it means to live a good and meaningful life.
It makes me think about those people who have inspired me in my own life. Teachers, mentors, friends who really embody those qualities I admire. They might not be famous or historically significant, but their impact on my life has been profound.
Absolutely. Scheler believed that exemplars could be found in all walks of life, not just among the elite or powerful. It's about embodying those values in everyday life, living with integrity and purpose.
And he identified 5 main types of exemplary persons, didn't he? The saint, the genius, the hero, the leading mind of civilization, and the master in the art of living. These seem to represent different paths towards embodying those essences and values we discussed earlier.
You're exactly right. He saw these figures as archetypes, representing different facets of human potential, each offering a unique path towards a life well lived. And he believed that these models weren't just historical figures, but archetypal ideas that are present within all of us. They reflect the different possibilities for human excellence.
So it's less about imitating specific people and more about recognizing and tapping into those universal patterns, those potentials that resonate with us on a deeper level.
Exactly. He believed that by studying these models, by reflecting on their lives and the values they embodied, we could gain insights into our own values, aspirations, and how we might live more authentically.
This is so fascinating. It's like he's giving us a roadmap, or maybe more like a compass, for navigating the complexities of life and becoming the best versions of ourselves.
That's a great analogy. So let's dive into these 5 archetypes. First up, the saint. What did Scheler consider the defining characteristics of a saint?
Yeah, this one seems pretty straightforward. We all have an image of what a saint is, right? Someone holy, pure, dedicated to a religious life.
Well, Scheler went a bit deeper than that. He said the saint embodies those highest religious values. They dedicate their lives to the pursuit of holiness, living in this state of radical selflessness, compassion, and love.
So it's not just about outward religious observance, but about this inner transformation, a way of being in the world that radiates love and connection to something greater than oneself.
Exactly. For Scheler, the saint transcended the ego. They strive to live in unity with the divine, recognizing the interconnectedness of all things. And they inspire not through power or achievement, but through humility, selflessness, and this unwavering commitment to those spiritual values.
It makes me think about those figures throughout history, across different religious traditions, who have exemplified this kind of radical love and dedication to serving others.
And Scheler believed that the saint represents a potential within all of us, this capacity for spiritual growth and transformation, regardless of our specific beliefs.
That's inspiring. Okay, let's move on to the genius. How did Scheler define this type of exemplary individual?
Well, the genius, for Scheler, embodies creativity, originality, and a profound understanding of the world. They're the ones who see things differently, think outside the box, and make those groundbreaking contributions to their fields, whether it's art, science, philosophy, whatever.
So it's not just about being really smart. It's about having a certain kind of vision, a spark, that allows them to push the boundaries of human knowledge and understanding.
Exactly. They're driven by passion, they see connections that others miss, and they often challenge conventional thinking. Their work becomes a testament to that unique vision, inspiring others to see the world in new ways.
We can probably all think of examples. Michelangelo, Beethoven, Einstein, Marie Curie. Those thinkers and artists whose work has really shaped our culture in lasting ways.
Their genius lies not just in their talent, but in their ability to transcend the limitations of their time, to tap into something universal that resonates across generations. And like the saint, Scheler believed this potential for creativity and insight exists within each of us. It's just waiting to be cultivated.
Okay, so we've got the saint and the genius. Now on to the hero. What qualities did Scheler associate with this archetype?
The hero, for Scheler, embodies courage, strength, and a willingness to sacrifice for a greater cause. They're the ones who face danger and adversity head-on, standing up for their convictions even when it's difficult or dangerous.
So we're not just talking about physical strength or bravery in battle, but a kind of moral courage, a willingness to put oneself on the line for something bigger than oneself.
Exactly. It could be a soldier defending their country, an activist fighting for justice, or even just an ordinary person standing up to a bully. It's about that unwavering commitment to doing what's right, even when it comes at a personal cost.
They serve as a kind of moral compass, showing us that it's possible to act with integrity and courage even in the face of fear and opposition.
Right. And Scheler believed that this potential for bravery, for standing up for what we believe in, resides within each of us. It might lie dormant, but it's there.
That's powerful. Okay, so we've got the saint, the genius, the hero. What about the leading mind of civilization? What makes this archetype different from the others?
The leading mind of civilization, for Scheler, was all about vision and foresight. They possess this deep understanding of the forces shaping society, the trends that are emerging, and the possibilities for the future.
So they're not just reacting to events as they unfold, but they're thinking ahead, anticipating challenges and opportunities, and helping to guide their communities towards a better future.
Exactly. They often have a deep understanding of history, politics, economics, and other fields that allow them to connect the dots and see patterns that others might miss. And they're able to articulate compelling visions for the future, inspiring others to work towards those goals.
It makes me think of leaders like Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, those who not only led their people through tumultuous times, but also articulated a vision for a more just and equitable society.
Right. Their leadership wasn't just about managing day-to-day affairs, but about inspiring hope, fostering unity, and charting a course towards a better future.
And Scheler believed this archetype, this leading mind, exists within all of us. We all have the potential to think big, to see beyond the immediate moment, and to work towards a better future.
He did. It might manifest in different ways, but the potential is there. Now, on to the final archetype, the master in the art of living. This one feels a bit different from the others, less about outward achievements and more about an inner way of being.
Yeah, it's intriguing. What did Scheler see as the defining characteristics of this archetype?
For Scheler, the master in the art of living embodied wisdom, balance, and a deep appreciation for the simple joys of life. They've cultivated this inner peace and contentment, a way of being in harmony with themselves and the world around them.
It's not about fame or fortune, but about approaching life with a certain quality of presence, awareness, gratitude.
Exactly. It could be an artist finding joy in their creation, a gardener connecting with nature, a parent cherishing time with their family, or someone who finds fulfillment in simple acts of kindness.
It's about finding meaning and purpose in the quality of our experiences and relationships, not just in external achievements or possessions.
Yes, this archetype, for Scheler, serves as a guide for how we can all strive to live more authentically, with greater integrity, and with a deeper appreciation for the beauty of life.
It's a beautiful image, especially in a world that often feels so chaotic and driven by the pursuit of more. Scheler seems to be saying that true happiness and fulfillment lie in cultivating that inner peace, gratitude, and a sense of connection to something larger than ourselves.
I think you're right. He saw this potential for wisdom, for that deep appreciation for life, simple joys, as something that exists within all of us.
Okay, so we've explored Scheller's 5 models of exemplary persons: the saint, the genius, the hero, the leading mind of civilization, and the master in the art of living. They're all distinct, obviously, but there seems to be a common thread running through them. This kind of inner fire, a commitment to something greater than themselves.
I think you've hit on something important. Scheler believed these exemplars weren't just exceptional individuals, but that they represented different facets of human potential that we all possess. They're like guides, helping us to recognize those seeds of greatness, whether it's creativity, courage, wisdom, or compassion that are within each of us.
They're like those beacons, illuminating different paths towards a more meaningful and fulfilling existence.
And they remind us that true greatness isn't found in external validation or material success, but in aligning our lives with our deepest values and aspirations.
This deep dive into Max Scheller's phenomenology has been so enriching. His insights into the human experience are just so profound. His emphasis on essences, on values, on love, on the power of these exemplars. It all offers such a rich and nuanced perspective on what it means to be human, especially in a world that often feels so focused on the superficial and the fleeting.
I completely agree. His work challenges us to confront those big questions, the ones that really matter. Questions about the nature of reality, the meaning of life, how to live ethically and authentically. It's not always easy, but it's so worth it.
It's a call to action, isn't it? To tap into that potential for compassion, creativity, courage, wisdom, and that deeper connection to something greater than ourselves.
And to remember that we're not alone in this journey. We have these exemplars to guide us. And we all have the potential to become exemplars ourselves, inspiring others to live more meaningful lives.
Now, before we get ahead of ourselves and start planning our paths to sainthood or genius, let's shift our focus back to Scheller's vision for the future of humanity. He was quite optimistic, wasn't he? He believed in this possibility of a new enlightenment.
He did. He saw it as a real possibility. And central to that vision was his concept of Ausgleich, that process of mutual understanding and interpenetration between those diverse cultures and knowledge systems we talked about.
Right. It's not about creating some kind of homogenous global culture where everyone thinks and believes the same things. It's about fostering a genuine exchange of ideas and perspectives, recognizing our differences while also celebrating our shared humanity. But honestly, it's hard to imagine achieving that kind of global understanding, especially given the state of the world today. Everything feels so polarized.
Scheler recognized those challenges, but he was convinced that education could play a crucial role in fostering this Ausgleich. He saw education as this transformative experience, one that could awaken individuals to their spiritual potential and help them connect with that shared humanity that transcends cultural differences.
So it's about going beyond just filling our heads with information. It's about cultivating those qualities of mind and heart, the empathy, the open-mindedness, the humility that allow us to see the world through different lenses and to recognize that interconnectedness of all things.
Yes, exactly. He believed that this kind of transformative education is essential for cultivating the compassion, the understanding, and the wisdom that we need to bridge those divides and work towards a more peaceful and harmonious future.
It's a message that feels so relevant today as we grapple with these global challenges like climate change, social injustice, political polarization. Scheler seems to be suggesting that finding real, lasting solutions isn't just about technological innovation or political maneuvering. It requires this fundamental shift in our consciousness, this willingness to embrace a more holistic and interconnected view of ourselves and the world.
I think that's at the heart of his message. He believed that our current predicament isn't just the result of external circumstances, but it's also a reflection of our inner state, our values, our attitudes, the way we relate to ourselves, to each other, and to the world around us.
It's a powerful message, one that challenges us to look inward as much as outward, to cultivate those qualities of compassion, wisdom, and connection if we truly want to create a better world.
And it brings us back to that question we posed earlier. How can we apply Scheller's concept of Ausgleich in our own lives, in our relationships, our communities, the world at large? How can we cultivate those qualities of mind and heart that allow us to truly engage with different perspectives, to bridge those cultural divides, and to work towards a more inclusive and compassionate future?
It's a big question, one that we'll explore in more depth in the final part of our deep dive into the thought of Max Scheler. Stay tuned. It is a challenge, isn't it? Putting those ideas into practice to really live out Scheller's vision, not just admire it.
It's not easy, that's for sure, especially when the world feels so divided. But Scheler believed that change always begins with the individual, with that personal commitment to cultivating empathy, understanding, that open-mindedness.
It makes me think about how often we surround ourselves with people who already agree with us. You know, those echo chambers we hear about. It's comfortable, but it doesn't really challenge us to grow or to understand those who see things differently.
Scheler was all about dialogue, really listening to and engaging with different perspectives, even those that make us uncomfortable, that challenge our assumptions.
It's easy to dismiss those we disagree with, write them off as wrong or close-minded. But Scheler seems to suggest that there's always something to learn, even from those perspectives that might initially seem completely alien to us.
He believed that every perspective, every worldview, ultimately emerges from that realm of essence we've been talking about. So even if we disagree on the specifics, there's that common ground, that shared human reality that connects us.
That's a hopeful thought. It's not about erasing our differences, but about finding that common ground, that shared humanity that makes understanding and connection possible, even amidst disagreement.
Exactly. And remember, Scheler placed so much emphasis on the transformative power of love. He believed that love, in its deepest sense, could help us bridge those divides, see beyond our limited perspectives.
He wasn't just talking about romantic love, right? It's a broader concept. Oh, absolutely. It's about love for humanity, a compassion that extends to all beings, recognizing that inherent dignity and worth in every person.
This reminds me of what we were talking about earlier, those exemplars, the saints, the geniuses, the heroes.
Right. He saw those figures as embodying that love, that commitment to something greater than themselves.
And he believed that those qualities aren't limited to just a few exceptional individuals. They're potentials that exist within each of us.
Exactly. It's like they're showing us what's possible, illuminating those different paths towards a more meaningful, more fulfilling way of being in the world.
It's inspiring, isn't it? Not just to admire those who embody those values, but to strive to embody them ourselves, to become those exemplars for others.
He believed that each of us has that capacity to make a difference, to contribute to a more just, more compassionate, more harmonious world.
It's a message of hope, a reminder that even amidst all the chaos and division, that potential for positive change, for growth, for connection, it's still there. It's within us. And it starts with each of us, with that individual commitment to cultivating those qualities of heart and mind, the empathy, the understanding, the compassion.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of Max Scheler. It's been a fascinating journey, to say the least.
It has. Challenging at times, but ultimately, I think, really hopeful.
His work is just so rich, so nuanced. Those ideas about essences, about values, about love, about those exemplars, it gives us so much to think about, so much to work with as we try to make sense of our lives and our place in the world.
He reminds us that philosophy isn't just this abstract intellectual exercise. It's a way of engaging with the big questions, the questions that really matter. And those questions can guide us towards a more meaningful and fulfilling existence.
So to our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring the ideas of Max Scheler. Keep asking those big questions, keep seeking out those sources of inspiration, and keep striving to embody those values that can make a real difference in the world.
And keep those conversations going. Engage with those who see things differently. You never know what you might learn.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.